So today I have the pleasure of introducing to you one of my colleagues, Dr. Darrell Kleinke. I've talked a little bit about Darrell previously already. He is really our systems thinker, our systems engineering, our systems processor, but he's a lot more than that. He's a business person as well with a deep background in manufacturing through his time, in particular at Ford Motor Company, and has been a professor of engineering and has been teaching master level engineers in terms of system thinking for a while. And we're fortunate to have him on our team. So, Daryl, first off, thanks for agreeing to be interviewed and being a part of what we're doing here with education.
I'm happy to do it. I really think this is a noble cause, so glad to be here.
I think that's actually the first time I talked to you about this. That was the word you used, noble. You said,
Well,
you, you,
something needs to be done. We're
you
trying to do
described
something.
you described it as a noble cause. What I'd love to do, because you've obviously been an educator, which is not at the K-12 level, but you've been an educator and you've been in industry. And so I'd love for you to kind of go back to your 4 days and frame in particular the complexities of what was Ford prior to them deciding that quality had to be improved, and then what that transition was. And I'm going to ask this a big conversation, and we can do it in
Yeah.
pieces. But and then where might it apply or be very relevant to education?
So I started in the auto industry 1994. In those days, it's kind of the end of the big three. And I don't want to say the end of it, but the introduction of the imports and particularly Japanese vehicles were coming on strong. And to our dismay, we were getting beat in the quality realm. So Ford made a very concerted effort, an absolute focus on quality. Quality meaning, first of all, get it right the first time. Or if you find something going wrong, you immediately fix it and have that mindset of, I see the issue. In fact, I'm going to stop production, which was a super no-no before those days. Stop production, fix what's going wrong, and then start it up again. One of the phrases I liked in the manufacturing world was, don't make it, don't take it, don't pass it on. So don't make a quality problem. If you do know what's happening, stop it. Don't take it from the stage before you. If you see one coming in, stop it. And for certain, don't let a quality issue leave your station and go to the next. And that was on the assembly line, but that also became the mantra in product development as well, right? Don't let quality problems fester. And with that absolute intensity, Ford regained the number one position in quality. And I look at the education field, and as you mentioned, Darsweil, I worked in the college level, so freshman through senior, but same kind of idea, right? Don't send a group of students or a single student through to the next level. But in academia, that happens all the time, right? We have a problem where maybe we're not training the student right, but we pass it on to the next level and they just matriculate through the system, which I think is a problem in the academic world, which is parallel to the quality issue we had back at Ford as well. So there's lots of parallels. I also think another parallel here is when you think about the assembly line, here in Detroit, it's like the goal is, produce as many vehicles as possible. And pre-quality days, it was pump those vehicles out. Even if you had a quality defect, we'd fix it later. Just keep that line rolling. Whatever it took, volume mattered, not quality. And again, that got us in trouble and led to quality issues. And I see the same thing in academia, right? Just move the kids along and have them come out the end of the assembly line. And you think of K-12 education, that really is operating like an assembly line, just moving the students through and out they go. So I see so many parallels here. And the thing that changed the auto industry, some folks who've been around as long as I have, but you remember a gentleman by the name of Deming, who was kind of pushed out of the U.S. auto industry, went to Japan and really emphasized quality measures there. And that's what really drove the Toyotas of the world to come up and improving quality. So these principles have been around, and in the U.S. auto industry, we just didn't listen to them till it was a desperate time.
Mm.
And these quality principles, I believe, are around education as well, but we have yet to listen to them, in my view. So the parallels between industry, automotive, and academia, I see it all the time. And I think there's a lot that could be learned in academia by looking at how the auto industry addressed their problems. So,
And so one of the things that is a real aha moment for me and for Dorothea is the way that we go about approaching problems.
mhm,
And it's really human nature, I suspect, to think about things in a sequence, in a linear fashion. And we see in education, and maybe you can even offer some examples in manufacturing, where you zero in on something like we've got to improve low test scores. So
yeah,
the focal point is we're going to improve low test scores. But when you focus on that one area, there are so many other
mm,
problems that
right.
impact that one that you need to appreciate why you need to move them in unison versus sequentially. So help people to understand why linear doesn't work and why using a systematic approach to solving problems is going to be more effective.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's come on strong in the auto industry is this idea of systems and systems of systems, if you will. And thinking about that, you hit the nail on the head there, Darrell. So if you're thinking about linear, you're going to fix one point, one issue. Meanwhile, there's a whole cloud of other things happening around it. You'll actually find we use the word robust, which means a system that just keeps producing the same results no matter what happens. You'll find that systems, and especially bad systems, are quite robust. You can try and fix something, you fix it, and guess what? After a little while, it's going to continue to operate in its poor fashion. So the goal is to, and this might sound a little crazy, it's like you try to fix everything at once, right? I can't just do a great job in one area and let everything else go crazy. So you try to do a little bit everywhere. And the thing that changes when you start approaching problems from a system perspective is you realize it's really the interface between subsystems is where you're going to find most of these occurring. You know, within the teacher group, you might have things going just fine. Within the building maintenance group, you might have things going just fine. But when teachers in the maintenance department have to cross paths, it's that interface. And if you start thinking about all the different organizations and sub-organizations, and then you start thinking about mapping those interfaces of one to another, it becomes a very complex spider web, if you will, of complex interconnections of systems. And so when you start to approach it from a, I'll say a holistic point of view, and sometimes we throw around the word culture, you really need to establish a culture that's consistent throughout the system. Everyone starts to pull in the same direction, or at least have the same objectives. With that system kind of thinking, you slowly but surely start to move in the right direction, as opposed to a linear fix one area that's just going to fall back into its same old mode in a very short period of time. So,
I think we have great examples. Dorothea spent a lot of time talking about having been successful in improving the performance in low performing schools. Her
mhm.
engagement will end. The schools will be significantly improved, but a few years later, they have returned
Yep.
to their former poor performance. And
Yes.
because it's a very robust system of poor performance, and it's a cultural question.
Yeah.
I'm mindful of a couple of stories she tells. One story of a janitor that had a work order to come in and fix a sink or something in a classroom and decided that because he had this work order, he was going to attempt to fix it in the middle of class. So,
Right.
so he culturally,
Yeah.
his objective was to do his job. It was not tied to student and teacher success. His objective was misaligned with why the school existed. It's a perfect example. And there are these examples across the board. You know, and what's interesting, and I want to come back and go back into Ford for a second. And well, let me ask you first off, we haven't used the term, but this complexity, it has a specific term that I want you to introduce. in terms of complex problems like this?
Oh, yeah. We call these, they're known as wicked problems, which means it's a problem that, first of all, doesn't want to get solved. It may be impossible to solve. In fact, I don't even like to use the word solve because once you've got it, something working, a wicked problem will return and unsolve itself and things change all around it. So if you can embrace the fact that you're dealing with a wicked problem that doesn't want to be solved and will not stay solved, it means you've always got to be on your toes, right? Even when I got my system working, this would be a non-robust system. My system starts to work, but the wicked problem, something changes outside my system, something changes inside my system, and it wants to break again. So these are very difficult problems. In fact, that's why I kind of stay away from the word solved because
Right.
face it, you can't solve it. You can just tamp it down and keep it under control as best you can, but you've got to always be on your guard because it changes all the time.
And if I were to apply that into a school environment, the students that you get every year are going to be different. So
Yep.
whatever worked with the last group of students is not necessarily going to work with this group of students. You've got teachers that are going to move and shuffle. So
Yep.
that's going to be a variable that you can't necessarily anticipate. You've got financial pressures that may come into the system. You may have a change in superintendent, a change in school board. You have all of these elements, the economy, that keep you off balance. And so one of the analogies we draw in our presentations is you want to have the root system of like a 700-year-old sequoia because you've got to be able to withstand the winds and the forces that are going to want to get you away from what your key purpose in, which has got to be the success of the teacher and the student.
Yeah, and to stay with that sequoia analogy, just face the fact that sometimes branches are going to break off, or there's going to be a big storm, or things are going to happen, right? Because it's a very volatile or wicked circumstance around it. I want to give
So
one example. Also, the culture thing. An example we use in industry often is, just think about two well-meaning departments. And here in the engineering world, I'll use the example. One department might be operating under we call it people are familiar with the KISS principle, right? Keep it simple, stupid. We just keep things simple over here. That's how we run things, and things run very well. Meanwhile, another department is running under the operation that of Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong. So what are they doing? They're adding redundant systems. They're adding stuff in to make sure that if one thing fails, they've got a backup and a backup. Meanwhile, another department, both well-meaning, I'm trying to keep things simple and eliminate things. I've got another department trying to do the right thing, make everything work, and they're adding things. So there just becomes this conflict of, pointing fingers and you guys don't know what you're doing, or meanwhile, both departments are very well-meaning, but the two cultures are so different. Neither one of them wrong, but different. And so you have this clash, and I can't think of anyone that I've ever met in the school system that says, I'm out here to destroy and wreck the school system. They're all trying to do the right thing because they're pulling in, we like to use the analogy of rowing in different directions.
Yeah.
The boat's going in a circle or going nowhere. Everyone well-meaning. So this is that notion of a system, a culture throughout your system where everyone's got the same shared consciousness would be a term to
shared
use.
consciousness.
Yeah.
Talk about unions, because frequently when we talk to educators, they'll talk about, you can't get that done through the teachers union. Well, you can't get that done, this union, that union. Ford's a union shop.
Yeah.
So how do we talk about, hey guys, we're not going to be successful if we can't get aligned around this common purpose. I know we have a union contract, but we need to address the fact that we're not performing well.
Yeah, I have a lot I could say. Well, I worked in the white collar side of things, but my father was UAW. My father-in-law was UAW. And UAW dollars put me through college, so I owe a lot to the UAW. It's like, I don't view the unions as an evil, terrible thing. But again, the same issue is when the unions got one objective and the companies got another objective. Again, there's just these constant clashes rather than working together. One thing that occurred during my tenure at Ford was the notion of profit sharing was introduced, and profit sharing with the union. It was amazing the change in attitude that happened when that occurred, right? And suddenly we're all pulling in the same direction. Let's eliminate waste and let's do the best we can to maximize profit sharing throughout the company. So, I think it's a case of trying to get on the same page with the union and see from their point of view. And I think unions can be very valuable, like in training their own folks, self-discipline within the union. A lot of things can be done positively with the union. So I'm not a person that would say, let's get rid of the union. My goal would be strengthen that bond. The union represents those workers, right? And stands up for those workers. So for me, from the white collar side for it, we want the workers to do well also.
Yeah.
But let's get on the same page here. So
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that I've seen some high performing workforces where profit sharing wasn't a possibility. I mean, certainly we've seen it in the
yeah,
electric utility industry
right.
where you can have a culture where people are really committed to doing the right thing. And so
Yeah.
there are ways to financially incentivize people beyond profit. I don't want somebody to hear that and walk away and say, yeah, well, that doesn't apply to us because it can apply.
Right. Right.
When I first came to you and mentioned the idea of legacy, aside from the noble cause comment, what struck you in terms of how one would go about having talked to Dorothea and looked at the elements? What else came to mind in terms of either challenges or opportunities that you think is relevant?
I think Dorothea has a wealth of knowledge in the K-12 level, and I really admire her. But you and I, Darsweil, coming from the business world and the engineering world, I think we could bring aspects that aren't normally applied to the academic world. And I know you can't always think of an education environment like a business or like a manufacturing site, but there are so many things like, like I mentioned in quality, just those principles of quality, the principles of good financial stewardship. I think those things between you and I, Dorothea, we have a three-legged stool of, the business, the technical side, and the academic side. I think we can bring a lot of concepts that can really help the school systems, even if it's just an awareness of things that are happening, shall I say, to them, that they might understand why things are happening the way they are. Why do you have a robust, not good system? And maybe it can break some of those barriers or longstanding thinking. Maybe it can break some of those down.
So let's talk for a second about key elements of the legacy concept, what we call systems plus playbooks plus scorecards, right? I'll give you the first pass at, and really one of the images we have says systems plus playbooks plus scorecards will always outperform a single high performing superintendent or teacher or principal or small group because of that systems playbook scorecards is a cultural dynamic. So talk about those elements in your words. How does that play out within a school system?
So when we introduce the systems thinking, again, I really would focus on those interfaces, right? How are, I use the term system architecture, how is your school district and even your schools themselves, how are they set up? How are they organized? And how are they arranged relative to the surrounding systems? And we look at the interfaces coming across those, and we look to quantify, we look at what kind of information, materials, and signals cross those boundaries. And those are the things we look at from a system perspective. For example, if I send out an email blast to all the departments in the district, first of all, do they receive the information? When they receive it, do they understand it? Is there a feedback loop that says I've received that information? So those are the kinds of system level interaction we would look for. And then on the level of a playbook, it's like, well, what do we want those responses to be, right? Do I need to communicate? Who do I talk to? What are the most effective ways to get my system to do what it wants it to do? And we call that emergent behavior. Have I organized my system in my communication network so that when something needs to get done or when a problem occurs, I know it occurred. When something needs to get done, I know it happened. So I'm looking at the organization and structure of my system. And then the scorecard is, how am I measuring the outcome, right? And we're going to say, to me, the whole purpose, the fundamental purpose of the education system is student success, right? Other things, sure, are important, right? The well-rounded student, the contributor to society, all those kinds of things are good things. But the academic success is it the number one priority? And what does that scorecard look like? Again, back to parallel to the auto industry, around 98 or 99, we started to introduce this notion of scorecards. And the nice thing about the scorecard is you could communicate across you can imagine the complexity of a Ford Motor Company, just extremely complex operation. But if there's a single scorecard that everybody looked to say, if I'm going to make a decision where I'm going to work on a quality issue or a cost reduction issue, which one wins? Everybody knows, the quality issue, because the scorecard emphasizes that. Now, it doesn't mean I ignore cost reduction, and then if management wanted to change the organization, they could just say, well, I'm going to increase the importance of cost reduction and lower quality. So there's trade-offs, right? I can't say everything is 100% important, right? So the scorecard communicates to the organization those priorities, and you can kind of watch to see how you're doing. Are we improving? Are we mapping things in the right direction? In the auto industry, the parallel thing is something called statistical process control. You can kind of watch your operation and see if it's continuing in its boundary, and then things are great. But sometimes you can watch trends, and if trends are starting to go awry, you can stop them before you create a bad part. So the system level, the organization, the playbook, how do we do things? And then the scorecard, how do we measure that things are going right or wrong? So
Excellent. And I, in terms of me kind of piggybacking on what you said, I think I'm going to start at the scorecard and maybe go the other direction. So what's so beautiful about that scorecard in my mind is you're looking to track things as close as possible to real time. What we would tend to call something like a leading indicator. You're not looking for the scorecard to have at the end of the semester what happened. We're looking to track things that are going to have a meaningful indication of whether or not things are taking place. Something simple like attendance, both of teachers and pupils, is an indication. Hey, do I have my good quality teacher in the class? And is the class there and interested? If it's a class that people are engaged in, the odds are that that's a good indication, right? That something good is taking place. Dorothea likes to talk about, are we getting clear comprehension of 80+% of the students? So the only way you get that is through the evaluation of that teacher. So someone's got to go in and give a real evaluation.
Yeah.
Is the teacher demonstrated high levels of comprehension? And if nobody ever goes in to see the teacher, or if nobody goes in to see the teacher regularly, then you don't really know whether or not, if you will, quality is being put into the product. Right.
Yeah.
So your whole comment about, don't take it, don't make it, don't pass it on. You've got to know whether or not you're putting quality into the product. And one way to validate that is through observation and evaluation. So these are just a couple of things in terms of the scores. What sort of scores might you capture? This whole notion of playbooks and systems. I as a guy who worked on Wall Street, my first dynamic around system is, where did the money flow? Is the money flowing towards teacher and student success?
Yeah.
Or is it flowing someplace else? Do you have facilities that should hold 1,000 students, but it's only 400 students in there because the politics won't let you shut the building down? But then you realize you've got a bunch of new teachers that you don't have sufficient support for their development to be effective because of where the money's being misaligned. So this really does bring this, in my mind, this frees pedagogy up to actually do what it does. I believe that the schools have committed educators. What they haven't figured out is how to get all of this other stuff out of the way so that quality education can take place.
Yeah. It's interesting. I like your analogy of the financial flow, because in the engineering world or in the manufacturing world, we also talk about flow as well. Think of an assembly plant, and raw material comes in one end of the assembly plant, and it flows, a bunch of raw material flows through the process, gets fabricated, things put together, and out the other end flows a vehicle. And in the engineering world, it's called one piece flow, right? We want that piece to go through that assembly line without error, without mistake, without having to get reworked or any of that stuff. And now I think of the education world, here come the students in kindergarten, first graders, and they're going to go out as 12th graders. We want that flow. We want that same kind of flow. We don't want to have to rework, and we don't want to have to send students back, and we don't want to have to them go off kilter. And we don't want to pass along students that are struggling because perhaps we haven't given the teachers enough, whatever they need to teach them, or students have different needs. It's not all students are made the same. So that kind of system and flow thinking goes through it. I want to go back to one thing too. You mentioned that scorecard. Even a scorecard as simple as teacher attendance, from a systems thinking perspective, if there's an attendance issue, we don't just assume, oh, because it's bad teachers, right? From a systems thinking, you start looking at all the subsystems that contribute to teacher attendance, right? And what's going on there, right? There could be a number of factors. It could be health issues. It could be teacher burnout. It could be many different things. And typically, because they're wicked problems, it's a combination of 3 or 4 different things. You can't just go in and fix one thing and then suddenly your attendance issue goes away. So that's why I think the notion is that we install this legacy thinking where, as the education system is trying to function, we look at every problem from a systemic interface issue, and the scorecard gives us an early indication before it's too late. So it's cool stuff.
It is. And so there's a comment I want to make and then a final question for you. I had a real aha moment working with the districts. And the aha moment was when I realized that in particular when we're dealing with new teachers, that their ability to learn the material that they were going to teach at a level where they had multiple strategies for teaching it, that they had a really in-depth understanding of it, whereby they could just, no matter what came at them, they were ready, right? They were ready to respond.
Right.
That challenge that the teacher had was the exact same expectations that we wanted for the student. So if you don't have a teacher that can, in effect, address the complexities of the subject matter, and if a student doesn't get it, be able to pivot and provide them with context and examples and kinesthetic versus auditory versus whatever needs to happen. If they're not able to do that, if the teacher can't do it, so the level that you need to bring your teachers to in order for us to have students that can do that. And our core focus here is generational educational success. We don't look at short-term wins. We're looking for long-term wins. And so my final question is, what is your final thoughts that you'd like to offer up? If you've got educators that are going to hear this, be it at the board level, superintendent, wherever, what's the message that you would like to convey, given where it is that we're going, what it is that we want through our Legacy Sustainable Success program?
Yeah, I like to use the word intentional and just say the system I have in place is the system I intentionally put there. The way things operate or the way I intend them to operate, rather than I've just been handed this mess and I just do the best I can, work my way through it. So have a plan, be intentional, decide. One of the tough things are you got to make a decision what's on that scorecard and what things get emphasized and what things don't. And so sometimes decisions are difficult, and in the past they just haven't been made. And again, the wicked problem raises its head again and just does whatever it wants to do, and you're stuck with something that you never intended. So my final thought is look at your district and the organization. Are things going the way you intend them to go? And if so, and it's not working, can you change it? And I would suggest, my guess is, for those districts that are struggling, there isn't that much intent. The wicked problem has taken over and the monster's eating you, and it's not what you intended at all. So be intentional. We can help you lay out those plans. And I guess I'd also say it's not going to be easy, right? Because there's going to be some tough decisions along the way. And One of the premises of systems engineering is that no system can be optimal to all parties involved, which means no matter what you do, someone's not going to like it, right?
So no matter what you do, someone's not going to like it. And what you're looking for is for the fact that you have a common purpose on where you're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
That is that North Star is what holds people in place, and they recognize, okay, this is not what I personally want, given whatever my personal agenda is, but
Yep.
over the long term, because we're talking generational excellence here, we can get a lot of these things resolved. As you say, you can't solve, but we can get them resolved in
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah. And my final example from the auto industry is back to this quality issue. In my day, I would rather be working on the cool styling thing or what's the next Mustang or how do I get more horsepower and drive these hot cars around rather than making sure that stuff doesn't break.
Yeah,
But we all recognize that, for the company to be successful, quality had to be job one, and it became job one. Like it or not, we all pulled together and brought Ford Motor Company quality up there to number one again. So same can happen in your district, right? You can be number one, but everybody's got to pull in that same direction.
excellent. Daryl, thank you. It's really appreciated. And folks, if you've got anything you want to ask us, please do so. Info at cfpinnovation.com is the logical place to reach out. There'll also be some other links for my Substack and the website and the like that will be included. And thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Darsweil.